The wind clawed at Claudia Sheinbaum's coat as she stepped onto the curb outside the JW Marriott in downtown Washington, D.C. Flanked by 2 aides and a translator, she adjusted her scarf and kept her gaze forward, ignoring the camera flashes already catching up to her. Her arrival had been quiet, intentionally so, but in this city even silence had a price. "What's the first stop?" she asked, barely above a whisper, her voice dry from the flight. "Brookings," one aide replied. "You'll be sitting down with Peterson after the panel. Just a photo op. Keep it brief." Claudia nodded, her jaw tight. She was used to opposition, used to cold receptions, but this was different. There was something in the air today, a tension that had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with territory. By the time they entered the think tank's atrium, the marble echoed with footsteps that weren't theirs. Journalists, staffers, and protesters were already swirling near the glass doors. Some held signs in English and Spanish, others chanted vaguely. Claudia didn't look at them. Inside the panel room, Jordan Peterson sat like a coiled wire in a navy suit, fingers steepled under his chin. He wasn't speaking to anyone, he didn't need to. His presence was enough to freeze the energy in the room. Claudia was announced. There was a pause, barely perceptible but unmistakable, before the polite applause began. She walked to the podium with grace, chin up, eyes steady. But her ears burned. It wasn't until after the panel, during the so-called casual coffee in the green room, that things unraveled. "Dr. Peterson," Claudia began in English, extending a hand. "It's an honor to finally meet." Peterson didn't shake it. He stared at her hand like it was a misplaced object. "This isn't your land," he said flatly. The room fell into stunned silence. "Excuse me?" Claudia asked, blinking once. "You heard me," Peterson said. "You come here pretending diplomacy, but you represent a movement that doesn't respect borders or culture or sovereignty. This isn't your land." One aide stepped forward, but Claudia raised her hand to stop him. Her face remained calm, but her chest pounded. "I came to speak," she said softly, "not to conquer." Peterson smirked. "You came to promote ideas that have already corroded your own country, and now you bring them here. No thanks." He turned his back and walked out, just like that. She stood there, frozen, not in fear, but in rage and humiliation. Cameras were already being raised again. Someone whispered her name. A staffer broke the silence. "Do you want to leave?" Claudia didn't answer. She stared at the door Peterson had vanished through, her breath shaking. Something had been planted today. Not just conflict, but something deeper, a fracture. And she knew. This wasn't over. The car ride back to the embassy was silent, too silent for Washington. Outside, the city pulsed with diplomatic rhythm, flags waving under gray skies, hurried interns with phones glued to their ears, black SUVs prowling the avenues like watchful animals. Inside, Claudia sat still, her eyes locked on the blur of traffic beyond the tinted window. Her aide Javier finally broke the silence. "He ambushed you," he muttered. That wasn't protocol. Claudia didn't respond immediately. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, thumbs digging into each other. She wasn't new to confrontation, but this wasn't political disagreement. It was personal rejection, sharp and public. "I wasn't there for him," she said quietly, "but he made it about himself anyway." The translator, Eleanor, looked up from her phone. Mexican press already picked it up. Social media's split down the middle. Some are calling him a coward, others say you provoked him. Claudia gave a soft, bitter laugh, and I said 5 words. Back at the embassy, a small team waited in the meeting room, eyes flickering between her and the wall-mounted TV, where a local news anchor replayed Peterson's words. The clip was already edited, subtitled, packaged like a bomb ready for mass consumption. "We need to respond," said one young diplomat. "Control the narrative." "No," Claudia said, shaking her head. "Not yet. Let them talk." Javier raised an eyebrow. "Doing nothing makes you look weak." "No," she repeated. "It makes them impatient. They want a fight. I'm not giving it to them on their timeline." Someone knocked. A secretary opened the door and leaned in. "Representative Ocasio-Cortez's office just called," she said. "She wants to meet, off record, tonight." A murmur passed through the room. Claudia nodded slowly. "Good. Set it up." Discreetly. Later that evening, tucked in a quiet corner booth of a small Ethiopian restaurant in Columbia Heights, Claudia finally exhaled. The place was nearly empty, intentional. Alexandria sat across from her, dressed plainly, no aides, no phones on the table. "You handled it better than I would have," Alexandria said, sipping tea. "He wanted to humiliate you." That much was clear. Claudia offered a tight smile. "He didn't humiliate me. He exposed himself. But the media won't see it that way." Claudia leaned forward. "Tell me something. Why now? Why the invitation? Why the sudden attention?" Alexandria's eyes flicked away for a second, just a second. "There's talk," she said. "Quiet talk. About alliances forming. Latin America's leaning in. And certain people here feel threatened." Claudia narrowed her eyes. "So Peterson was the warning shot?" "Maybe," Alexandria said. "Or maybe just the first of many." The check arrived. They split it without discussion. As Claudia stood to leave, Alexandria touched her arm. "Just be careful. The crowd you're challenging doesn't play fair." Claudia nodded, pulling her coat tight. "I never expected them to." Outside, the cold had turned sharper, and Claudia, for the first time that day, smiled, not out of comfort, but out of clarity. The next morning, the embassy felt like a pressure cooker. Phones buzzed non-stop. Aides moved briskly between rooms, and the press officer, sleep-deprived and red-eyed, kept muttering about a narrative war. Claudia stood in front of the mirror in her temporary office, adjusting the collar of her navy blouse. Calm outside, calculating within. Javier entered without knocking. "You're trending again," he said. "This isn't your land is everywhere. Right-wing influencers are piling on. Tucker Carlson called you a globalist Trojan horse." Claudia barely blinked. "Let them talk." "They're not just talking. They're coordinating. Leaks are showing up in places they shouldn't. Your university ties, campaign donors, even your father's background." She turned to face him fully. "So they're digging. Good. That means they're worried." Javier stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Claudia, this is deeper than Peterson now. Someone's funding this reaction. Think tanks don't mobilize overnight like this." Claudia picked up a folder from her desk. Inside were printouts of speaking invitations, meeting requests, and polite cancellations, all dated after the Peterson incident. "They want me silenced before I speak again," she said. "But I'm not leaving." Javier hesitated. "We could pivot. Go to New York early, avoid the DC circuit. Distance you from this." "No." She closed the folder. "If I leave now, I prove him right." She headed to her next meeting, a closed-door roundtable at Georgetown University, originally planned as a policy discussion on climate partnerships. Now it felt like a diplomatic chess match. The room was filled with academics, former ambassadors, and NGO leaders. Conversations were polite, even warm, but Claudia could feel the shift. Some eyes were warmer than others. Some smiles didn't reach their eyes. Halfway through the session, a professor posed a question that felt more like a trap. "How do you see national identity evolving in a post-border era?" Claudia paused before answering. "I don't believe in a post-border era," she said calmly. "Borders exist. Cultures exist. What I do believe is that collaboration doesn't threaten sovereignty. It strengthens it. Our future won't be about walls or erasing identities. It will be about connecting them with integrity." A few heads nodded. Others scribbled notes. But no one challenged her, not out loud. Afterward, as she walked through the quiet Georgetown courtyard, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You don't belong here. Go home before it gets worse." She stared at the screen, then locked it. No expression, no reaction. Just the cold wind tugging at her coat and the smell of wet stone after a morning drizzle. Elena caught up to her. "You okay?" Claudia gave a small nod. "Just ghosts knocking." They walked back toward the embassy in silence. Claudia's mind was already racing ahead. Peterson was just the face. The real power moved in backrooms, in silence, in strategy. And if they were coming for her, she'd meet them where they lived. That night, the invitation came from the Mexican ambassador himself. A small dinner, he had said over the phone, just friends of Mexico. You'll be among allies. Claudia didn't believe in just anything anymore, not in this city. Still, she accepted. The ambassador's residence was a warm, colonial-style building tucked into Embassy Row. Ivy curled up its red brick walls, and golden light poured from its windows like a promise. Inside, the dining room was set for 10, linen napkins, crystal glasses, soft jazz playing low. But it wasn't the setting that caught Claudia off guard. It was the guest list. Senator Tom Reynolds, centrist, unpredictable. Marisol Diaz, head of a global humanitarian NGO. Tomas Andrade, a tech CEO who'd made billions selling software to both governments and Border Patrol. And across from Claudia, in a slate-gray suit, sat Miles Chan, former intelligence analyst turned security consultant. Quiet, sharp-eyed, unreadable, the ambassador raised a glass. To cooperation, he said, and to voices that cross borders. The meal began. Light conversation, polite laughter. But beneath the surface, Claudia felt the tension, like a string stretched just short of snapping. Midway through the main course, Miles leaned in slightly. You're handling the Peterson fallout with poise. Most would have cancelled the rest of the trip. Claudia met his gaze. If fear determined our movements, we'd all be standing still. Still, he continued, Washington doesn't take kindly to being challenged, especially by outsiders perceived as reformers. Or threats, she offered. Miles smiled faintly. Sometimes the line is thin. Reynolds cleared his throat. You're aware there's a subcommittee discussing foreign influence over academic institutions, right? Your name's come up. That's absurd, Claudia said. I'm not even here in an official capacity. Doesn't matter, Marisol said, dabbing her lips. In this climate, appearance is impact. Claudia's fork paused midair. Let me ask you all something. If a leader from a neighboring country, who believes in reform, in sustainability and fighting corruption, comes to speak and the first instinct is fear, what does that say about the system here? The table went quiet. No one answered. It was Tomas who broke the silence. It says the system's fragile and it fears mirrors. After dessert, guests trickled out. Claudia lingered near the fireplace, swirling the last of her wine. Miles approached quietly. They'll escalate. I know. They'll dig, spin, discredit. I know. He hesitated. You could walk away, say your piece and go home. Claudia turned to him, calm but unwavering. And let them think they've won? No, that's not who I am. Miles nodded once, almost respectfully. Then he slipped on his coat and vanished into the Washington night. Outside, snow had started to fall, light, silent, like secrets landing on stone. Claudia stood by the window, watching it gather, not retreating, waiting. The press conference was scheduled for noon. Claudia stood behind the podium at the Mexican embassy, flanked by two flags, Mexico to her left, the United States to her right. Her blouse was crisp, her tone calm. Cameras blinked like restless eyes in the crowded room. Reporters filled every seat, some standing along the walls, holding phones, recorders, notepads. I want to thank the people of Washington and of this country for the opportunity to speak freely, Claudia began. What happened 2 days ago was not unexpected, but it was revealing. She paused. The silence held. There's a narrative being pushed, she continued, that diplomacy means obedience, that crossing a border, physically or ideologically, is a threat. I reject that. I come here not to impose ideas, but to offer questions. If that frightens people, perhaps the problem lies not with the questions, but with the foundations they shake. One reporter raised her hand. Ms. Sheinbaum, are you accusing Jordan Peterson of racism? Claudia didn't flinch. I'm accusing no one, but I'm observing that when a woman from the global south enters a space dominated by voices from the north and is told she doesn't belong, It says more about the gatekeepers than the guest. Another hand shot up. Do you regret coming? Claudia locked eyes with the man. No. I regret nothing that reveals the truth. A murmur passed through the room. Phones buzzed again. Later, in the embassy's back hallway, Elena met her with a nervous expression. There's something you need to see. She led Claudia into a private room and pulled up a video on her laptop. It was a grainy recording, apparently leaked from a private donor dinner the night before. In it, Peterson spoke casually to a group of high-profile guests. Sheinbaum represents everything that's wrong with modern politics, he said, holding a drink. Transnational socialism, academic elitism, disguised as progress. If we let people like her into our institutions, we're surrendering sovereignty. Someone in the crowd chuckled. Another muttered, Amen. Claudia watched without blinking. Do we know who leaked it? She asked. Not yet, Elena said, but it's spreading. Javier entered holding a tablet. CNN just picked it up. You're trending again. This time Claudia didn't react with tension. She leaned back in the chair, exhaled, and said, Good. Let people hear what he sounds like without the filter. Elena hesitated. We've had a call from the Atlantic. They want an op-ed. You'd control the message, Claudia nodded. I'll write it tonight. As the sun dipped behind the Potomac, the embassy lights turned golden. Across the city, conversations shifted. Claudia's words were being replayed, dissected, debated. But one truth was clear now. Even to those who disliked her, she wasn't here to be quiet. She was here to be heard. And no one, not even a man with a microphone and 1 million followers, was going to change that. Her op-ed, published at dawn, titled Voices Without Borders, Claudia's words hit inboxes and homepages before most of Washington had even brewed its first cup of coffee. It was direct, unflinching, and personal. I was told this is not my land, but I walk these streets with dignity, not because I claim ownership, but because I believe in dialogue without walls. The reaction was immediate. Support flooded in from academics, activists, students, and a surprising number of US veterans. Detractors doubled down, calling her manipulative, performative, dangerous, but even they couldn't deny her presence now. She had crossed from scandal into symbol. That morning, she was invited to appear on a live segment with PBS, a measured space, no shouting matches, just ideas. Halfway through the interview, the host leaned in. You've become a lightning rod for a larger debate. Immigration, sovereignty, identity politics. What do you make of that responsibility? Claudia didn't blink. I didn't come here to be a symbol, but if that's the role they've cast me in, then I'll carry it with clarity. And Jordan Peterson? She smiled faintly. He gave me a gift in his own way. He made his fear visible. That's always the beginning of change, when fear shows its face. The segment went viral, again. Later that day, in a quiet cafe near DuPont Circle, she met with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez one last time. I read the op-ed, Alexandria said, stirring her espresso. It hit hard. You pulled no punches. Claudia stirred her tea. We're past the time for polite positioning. You made enemies, you know. I didn't come to make friends. Alexandria smirked. That's what I like about you. A pause settled. Then Alexandria added, more serious, What's next, you heading back? Claudia shook her head. I'm going to LA next, then maybe Chicago. Conversations are bigger outside the Beltway. You're not afraid it'll get worse? Claudia looked out the window, where the late afternoon sun lit the faces of passers-by, each walking their own quiet revolution. I've already been told I don't belong. There's nothing left to fear after that. As she left the cafe, her phone vibrated. A message from Javier. Interview request from BBC, booked flights for LA, leaving at 6 a.m. Claudia replied with a single word. Confirmed. That evening, she stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, coat wrapped tight, hands bare against the cold. Tourists wandered. Joggers passed, but Claudia stood still, looking out over the reflecting pool, her breath a ghost in the crisp air. A voice behind her spoke softly. Still here? She turned. Miles Chan. You thought I'd be gone by now? She asked. He shrugged. Most people fold under pressure. I'm not most people. He nodded, then handed her a small envelope. No logo. Just her name. Inside, a single sheet with an address in New York. A private conference, high level, invitation only. Doors don't always open for people like us, he said, but sometimes they open because we force them to. She looked down at the paper, then up at the skyline, and smiled. She was just getting started. 3 weeks later, Claudia stood in a crowded auditorium at UCLA. The room wasn't filled with politicians or diplomats, but students, hundreds of them. Some held notebooks, others clutched phones, recording every word. A few wore pins with her name. She took a breath. When I arrived in Washington, she said, I was told I didn't belong, but the truth is no one has the power to define where our voices are valid. Applause erupted. Behind the scenes, her team was expanding. Volunteers from 5 states, a documentary crew following her tour, even invitations from university departments once hesitant to host her. But the tension hadn't disappeared. Anonymous threats still came. Critics grew louder. Peterson had given another interview calling her the polite face of ideological invasion. And yet, she didn't waver. Outside the building, a reporter caught her briefly. Do you consider this a movement now? Claudia smiled, her voice calm but charged. No, she said. It's a conversation, but one they can't stop anymore. She walked toward the waiting car, her coat billowing in the wind, the campus buzzing behind her. The fight hadn't ended in Washington. It had only just begun.